The mayor of our city is purchasing huge batches of firearms under the guise of medicines. I shouldn't have gotten involved. I'm Jared, 24, and I work in IT in New Jersey. Nothing too flashy, mostly back-end stuff, server maintenance, fixing things when people accidentally delete everything. Typical tech support hell. I commute into the city most days, and last Thursday was just another miserable, rainy afternoon on the path. I had my headphones in, zoning out, when I noticed a black laptop bag wedged between the seat and the wall. It was sleek and expensive looking, like one of those carbon fiber ones business people use, but worn down a bit like someone had been dragging it around for years. There was no one nearby acting like they'd lost anything, and the train was close to empty. I picked it up, glanced around, and nobody reacted. It didn't even have a name tag, just a tiny faded sticker on the side with a single word, DRVR. I'll admit, my first instinct wasn't pure. I'm not saying I plan to keep it, but the idea of checking it out definitely crossed my mind. I mean, it looked abandoned. But I work in IT. I've seen how losing a work laptop can wreck someone's week or career, so I decided to do the responsible thing and turn it in. But first, I tried to boot it up, just to see if there was any identifying info I could pass along. It was password protected, of course. No name on the login screen, just a simple user icon and a field. No hint of a company or anything. So I turned it off, figured I'd hand it over at the Lost and Found when I got off at 33rd. But here's the thing. The guy at the Lost and Found window couldn't have cared less. He took one look at the laptop and basically told me, if no one claims it in 30 days, it's city property. I asked if they'd try to identify the owner, and he shrugged. I'm pretty sure he didn't even write anything down. So yeah, I walked out of there with the laptop still in my bag. I didn't touch it again for a couple of days. I kept telling myself I was going to drop it off at a precinct or somewhere more official, but I got busy, and every time I looked at it, something about it just bugged me. Not because it was sketchy looking, because it was so clean. No stickers, no scuffs. Just that one weird label. DRVR. On Sunday night, I cracked. I fired it up again and connected a bootable Linux USB. Took me a little work, but I got into a shell. The thing was locked down tighter than anything I'd ever seen outside of a corporate environment. Encrypted partitions, hidden volumes, all the stuff you use when you don't want people poking around. But there was one unencrypted folder. It was called KDR. Inside were dozens of files with gibberish names, long strings of letters and numbers, and one plain text file. That one was called readme_first.txt. I opened it. The file was simple. No greetings, no explanations. Just a set of instructions. If you found this machine, you're being watched. Do not connect to the internet. Do not attempt to decrypt the archive unless you are ready to face the consequences. Everything you need is in this folder. The key is not. Karma Driver doesn't forgive. No signature, just that name at the bottom. Karma Driver. I sat there rereading it over and over, heart pounding like I just clicked on a phishing link at work. I was alone in my apartment, lights low, rain tapping on the windows, and suddenly this ordinary-looking laptop felt like it weighed 100 pounds. I didn't know what to make of it. Was it a prank? Some elaborate art project? Some hacker's weird dead drop? The folder had 47 files in it. 46 were encrypted archives, no file extensions, no clues. One was a .log file, and even that was gibberish unless you knew what you were looking for. Hex codes, maybe? I wasn't sure. But I copied everything to an external drive and unplugged the laptop from power. Then I took the battery out. The feeling I had was weird, like I'd crossed a line, even if I hadn't done anything yet. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the line. If you found this machine, you're being watched. It's been 3 days now. No weird calls. No vans outside. Nothing to suggest I've triggered some kind of trap. But I also haven't touched the files again. I keep telling myself it's none of my business. That I'll turn it in. That someone else will figure it out. But I haven't turned it in. The name, Karma Driver, keeps echoing in my head. And I can't stop wondering who that person was. Or what they were trying to hide. And yeah, part of me wants to find out. I didn't go near the laptop again for a couple days after finding that Karma Driver note, but the tension in my chest didn't go anywhere. Every time I walked into my apartment, I glanced over at the black bag like it might move on its own. But I couldn't help it. Curiosity has always been my biggest flaw, or maybe my dumbest trait. Either way, by Wednesday night, I cracked again. I booted into the Linux shell, reconnected my external drive, and started poking around. The encrypted files were still locked tight, but after running a few pattern recognition tools, I noticed something odd. Buried in that .log file I thought was junk, there was a line that repeated at semi-random intervals. At first it looked like more gibberish, but when I isolated just those lines and ran them through a base 64 decoder, they spit out something that resembled file paths. That led me to a hidden partition on the laptop itself, one I'd missed during the first scan. And that's when everything changed. The hidden partition was a gold mine, or a ticking time bomb, depending on how you looked at it. There were folders nested deep inside, and not all of them were encrypted. Some were labeled with innocuous names like revenue or planning docs, but once I started opening them, I realized they weren't about business at all. They were spreadsheets, dozens of them. Some marked up with initials I didn't recognize, others linked to scanned receipts, wire transfer confirmations, land deeds. But then I found the folder called Heart Civic Ops. I thought it was a project file, maybe something to do with infrastructure or a local initiative. It wasn't. The documents were laid out like a criminal case file. The first Excel sheet was titled Key Figures, and it listed names, departments, aliases, phone numbers, even favorite restaurants. There was a profile on someone named Alan T. Milford. Took me less than 2 minutes of Googling to realize that was the mayor of Heart City. 3-term incumbent. Publicly beloved. Known for his anti-corruption platform. The next document was labeled Dirt. Just that. Dirt.xlsx. Inside, every row was another name and a set of attached files. Photos, scanned letters, bank transfers, offshore account details. There were shell company names cross-referenced against actual municipal contracts, and in some cases, even payouts to local law enforcement. One sheet literally mapped the cash flow from a supposed city beautification fund straight into the private investment accounts of several city officials, all tied to Milford. At that point, I stopped breathing for a second. My hands were cold and slick against the keyboard. I sat back, staring at the screen, trying to figure out how this was even possible. Someone had built a full dossier of illegal dealings that tied together politicians, police officers, lawyers, even journalists. Dozens of them. Some were names I recognized. People who'd been on the news, who'd been praised as local heroes. And every one of them was tagged with code names like Gunner, Redbook, Phantom 5. But the worst came when I opened a plain text file labeled Red Lines. It looked like a hit list. That's not even me being dramatic. It was a list of targets, and next to each name, there were notes in cold, clinical language. Exposure risk, medium, monitor only, active threat, requires silencing, scheduled for June 18th, contingency in place. One of the names had already been crossed out. I had to get up and walk around the apartment. I felt like I was going to throw up. My stomach was doing flips and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It didn't feel real. But everything about the way those files were structured, the way the metadata lined up, the dates, the timestamps, the precision, it screamed authenticity. This wasn't some elaborate LARP. This was someone's insurance file. A digital kill switch designed to bring down half a city's elite if they ever stepped out of line. And it was sitting on my desk because I was too nosy to leave it alone. I shut everything down immediately, disconnected the drive, unplugged the laptop, and packed it back into the bag. I even threw a towel over it, like that would help. For a while I just sat there on my couch in the dark, listening for sounds that weren't there, footsteps in the hallway, a knock at the door, the hum of something electronic I couldn't see. Paranoia kicked in fast and hard. I pulled the battery out of my phone, wrapped it in aluminum foil, and stuck it in a drawer. Dumb, probably. But I didn't care. That night, I didn't sleep. Every sound outside my window felt like a threat. I kept replaying that warning. You're being watched. And the craziest part? I believed it. My first instinct, once the shock wore off, was to hand it all over. I mean, what else are you supposed to do when you stumble into something like this? I figured I'd copy the files, bring them to the nearest precinct, explain how I found the laptop, and let them handle the rest. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just didn't want this crap anywhere near me. I even started drafting the message in my head. I rehearsed how I'd say I only looked because I wanted to find the owner, how I had no idea what was on it, how I didn't touch anything beyond what was already open. But something held me back. It was one particular PDF that stopped me cold. It was a scan of a briefing document from what looked like a law enforcement intel system. At first I thought it was fake, just styled to look official, but the formatting, the language, the watermark codes in the corner, they were too specific. I'd seen something similar when I helped a state trooper's office digitize their old archives during a college internship. This one had HCPD Intelligence Unit in the header. Heart City Police Department. The file was a report about a whistleblower named Darren Tusk, a mid-level accountant in the city's Transportation Bureau who'd flagged irregularities in fuel subsidies. The document detailed his daily routine, his online habits, even where he parked his car. And the final page? It said, Risk Category, Red. Escalation approved. There were no signatures, no names, but the tone was unmistakable. It didn't sound like they were protecting him. It sounded like they were planning something else. That's when the panic really set in. If the cops were part of this, then turning the laptop in wasn't just risky, it was suicidal. They'd know the files had been opened. They'd know someone had seen them. And it wasn't like I could walk into the station and say, hey, just ignore the part where your department greenlights hits on civilians. Best case, I disappear into some legal black hole. Worst case, they throw me in the river and write it off as an accident. So I did the opposite of what any sane person would do. I pulled the files back out and started cataloging them myself. I created an encrypted partition on an old hard drive I hadn't used since college, wiped it twice, and loaded only the most damning evidence. The bank ledgers, the offshore transfers, the shell company documents that linked back to Milford's campaign fund, the hit list entries with internal police memos. I stayed up for 3 straight nights parsing through everything. No food, barely any water, just coffee and anxiety, and a Google Doc full of notes and cross-referenced names. When I was done, I didn't go to the press. I didn't contact a lawyer. I didn't trust anyone. Instead, I logged into an old account I used to have on a forum that catered to whistleblowers and off-the-grid types. It was one of those deep web places that ran on invitation-only Tor nodes, mostly full of paranoid people and conspiracy theorists. But the admin, a guy who went by the handle Cifidero, had a reputation for 2 things: verifying documents and staying alive. I posted a small sample of the files under a burner alias, uploaded through a VPN chain that looped through 5 countries. It was maybe 10% of what I had, enough to make a splash, but not enough to trace. A couple of spreadsheets, a few emails between Milford and an unnamed intermediary, and 2 redacted screenshots of the HCPD internal report. It took less than an hour for the thread to explode. People didn't just read it, they dissected it. Someone recognized one of the shell companies. Another poster linked one of the account numbers to a Cayman Islands registry that had been flagged by an EU watchdog group. Within 12 hours, the files had been copied, reposted, mirrored across a dozen forums, and were making the rounds on encrypted messaging groups. I didn't post again. I didn't answer the comments. I stayed quiet and watched the chaos from a distance. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was now watching me. By the next morning, the forum looked like it had been set on fire. The thread I started had grown to over 200 pages in less than 12 hours, and people were losing their minds. Every post was another theory, another connection, another accusation. Some thought it was a hoax. Others were already calling it Heartgate. Someone even claimed the documents were planted by a foreign intelligence agency, which was ridiculous considering half of it involved things like neighborhood zoning contracts and municipal waste budgets. But buried in the noise, one name kept popping up again and again: Allison Graves. At first, I didn't know who she was. I thought maybe another anonymous poster like everyone else. But her replies were different. No tinfoil hat speculation, no dude trust me energy. Just precise, controlled questions. She quoted timestamps from the PDFs, cross-referenced campaign filings. She even called out a discrepancy in one of the wire transfers that I hadn't noticed. A rounding inconsistency in a Cayman Island bank that lined up with a dormant hedge fund tied to Milford's brother-in-law. A few hours later, someone posted a link to one of her old articles. Turns out Allison was an investigative journalist, one of those freelancers who'd bounced between small outlets for years because her stories hit too close to home for most mainstream publishers. I looked her up. She'd written about military contract fraud, missing state funds in Louisiana, and a massive cover-up involving toxic waste near a school. The woman had a habit of stepping on landmines and surviving. Then she dropped a bomb of her own in the thread. She posted, "I've seen this signature before." Karma Driver was mentioned in a leak I received 2 years ago that I couldn't verify at the time. If they're back, they're either alive or someone's using their files. I want to know which. If the source sees this, reach out. That made my blood run cold. I stared at the screen, rereading that sentence. The part that hit me the hardest wasn't her wanting to talk. It was her certainty that Karma Driver might still be alive. Until then, I'd assumed this was someone who'd vanished, maybe even been killed. But if this wasn't just a digital dead man's switch, if this person had actually left the laptop behind intentionally, knowing someone like me might find it and do something with it, that changed everything. I didn't want to contact her. I'd already done too much. But something about the way she wrote, the way she peeled back layers without panicking or jumping to conclusions, made me think she wasn't just another journalist looking for a scoop. She sounded like someone who understood how dangerous this really was. I created a new Proton Mail account. Picked a name that sounded forgettable. John 80. I kept the message short. I saw your post. I don't know who Karma Driver is, but the data is real. I found it by accident. I can't tell you where. I'm not trying to play games. Just trying not to end up dead. I hit send and closed the browser. For the next 4 hours, I paced around my apartment, certain I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But then a reply came back. I believe you. I won't ask how you got it, but I need to verify what you've shared. If you're willing to work with me, we can make sure this doesn't get buried. I won't expose you. She didn't push. She didn't even ask for proof that I was the original poster. Just offered a way forward. And for the first time since I found that damn laptop, I didn't feel completely alone. Allison and I didn't speak over the phone, not even once. Everything went through encrypted emails, slow and cautious. I would send her files piece by piece, sometimes with notes, sometimes just raw. She never asked why I was doing it or what my real name was. She just took the material, dissected it, verified it, and started putting together what would eventually become the story that cracked open everything. The centerpiece of it all was something we called the Shadow Fund. That's what the internal files called it too, shdw.fnd. At first glance, it looked like a legitimate municipal holding structure, supposedly used to route money for emergency allocations, urban renewal programs, and public works grants. But once we started tracing the transactions, the truth came out fast. The fund was being used to launder millions, literal millions, through ghost contractors, shell corporations, and bogus nonprofit charities that didn't even have websites. The documents showed how money allocated for infrastructure improvements, sidewalks, housing grants, traffic signal upgrades, was funneled through a web of fake vendors. Those vendors would invoice for services, collect the cash, and then redistribute it back into accounts controlled by associates of the mayor. Sometimes the cash would show up under the guise of a donation to a local art foundation. Other times, it was masked as consulting fees to offshore entities registered in places like Street Kitts or Gibraltar. It was clean on paper but rotten underneath, and the deeper Allison dug, the worse it got. We weren't the only ones working in the background. Allison had sources, real people on the inside. One of them was a woman named Rachel, an administrative assistant who had worked in the procurement office for nearly a decade. She wasn't a hacker or an analyst. She was just someone who saw the numbers stop making sense and started asking questions. Quietly at first, then louder. According to Allison, Rachel had come to her months ago with small inconsistencies in expense reports and grant applications. It wasn't enough to go public with then, but now that she had the documents I'd found, Rachel could confirm that what she'd seen matched everything in the files. That confirmation was crucial. It was what let Allison move forward with the story. The article went live on a Thursday morning. Allison didn't publish on any of the big platforms. She went through a small investigative outlet based in Canada, one that had a reputation for shielding sources and ignoring cease and desist threats. The headline was direct. Heart City Mayor tied to secret fund laundering millions through fake tenders and charities. The story was long, brutal, and filled with evidence, screenshots, transaction histories, scanned documents, even partial emails that hinted at kickback arrangements. And most importantly, it cited an anonymous whistleblower inside the city's own procurement office who had verified the material. The article spread faster than I expected. Within hours, local news was picking it up. Politicians were issuing vague statements. There was chatter about emergency council meetings. Someone even started a thread on Reddit trying to map the shell companies. It felt like we'd actually done something. It felt like the truth had finally cracked through the surface. But that feeling didn't last. The next day, Allison sent me an encrypted message. Just 3 words. Rachel is gone. I stared at the screen, rereading it, hoping there was some kind of context I was missing. But there wasn't. Allison said she'd tried to contact Rachel that morning for a follow-up and couldn't reach her. Rachel hadn't shown up for work, hadn't called in sick, hadn't answered any messages. Her phone went straight to voicemail. No activity on her social accounts, nothing on her email, just silence. Her landlord told Allison that her apartment door was locked, nothing looked disturbed, and her car was still in the lot. But Rachel was gone. That hit harder than I expected. Until then, this whole thing had felt abstract. Dangerous, sure, but at a distance. Like I was watching someone else's fire from across the street. But this was different. Rachel wasn't anonymous. She'd taken a real risk. She'd trusted us. And now she'd vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, watching the blinking light of my router, wondering if I'd made the right decision by ever opening that damn laptop. I came home from work around 7. The hallway was dark, one of the overhead lights flickering in that slow, stuttering way that always made me uneasy, even before any of this started. I lived on the 3rd floor of a brick walk-up in Jersey City, nothing fancy but quiet, usually. I didn't notice anything wrong at first. The door wasn't kicked in, there were no sounds, no broken windows. But when I slid the key into the lock, something felt off. It turned too easily. The second I stepped inside, my stomach dropped. Every drawer had been yanked open. The couch cushions were sliced, the inside spilled across the floor like stuffing from a gutted animal. My laptop was missing. So was the external drive. The one I thought I'd hidden under the sink behind the cleaning supplies. Even the books on my shelves had been scattered, torn, tossed into piles like someone was in a rage or pretending to be. But it was the note that froze me in place. A single sheet of paper taped to the inside of the fridge door. Block letters, clean, printed in black ink. Stop digging, or you'll be next. That was it. No signature. No demands. Just a statement. Cold and final. I stood there for what felt like a full minute. Not moving, not breathing, just staring at the words. My brain was scrambling, trying to process whether I was supposed to run, scream, call someone, or pretend I hadn't seen it. I backed out of the apartment without touching anything and went straight to my car. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I just drove. I ended up in a parking garage near the waterfront, one I used to park in when I was still going into the office before we went mostly remote. I sat there with the engine off, hands on the wheel, the note burned into my mind. That was the first moment I really felt afraid, not nervous or paranoid, but real, visceral fear, the kind that makes your body feel like it doesn't belong to you anymore. My mouth was dry. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I had the sudden, irrational urge to destroy my phone, chuck it into the river, vanish off the grid completely. For an hour, I didn't contact anyone. I couldn't. I just sat there, trying to slow my thoughts down long enough to figure out if I was about to be followed or if I already was. I even turned my phone off, took the battery out, wrapped it in the same foil I'd used weeks earlier. I felt stupid doing it, but not as stupid as I'd feel if someone tracked me down a second time. Eventually, I sent Allison a message from a burner account using someone else's Wi-Fi. I told her what happened in the most basic terms I could. No detail, no drama, just the facts. My place was hit. The drive was taken. I found a note. Her reply came back an hour later. Come too far to stop. I'll handle what you lost. They want you scared. That means it's working. I wanted to scream when I read it. I didn't want to be told it was working. I didn't want to feel brave. I wanted to feel safe, and right now, the only thing I felt was hunted. But I knew she was right. We were past the point of walking away clean. They already knew who I was. They'd already come into my home. If I backed out now, it wouldn't keep me safe. It would just make me alone. The final push wasn't planned. It wasn't something I had in my head as part of any strategy. It came from desperation and a growing sense that if we didn't act fast, this whole thing would get buried and I'd vanish along with it. Allison had found a name buried in the financial logs. Brightstone Holdings LLC, one of the shell companies laundering money through fake infrastructure projects. It had come up several times in wire transfers connected to Heart City's procurement office, but its actual operations were a black hole. No public-facing business. No legitimate office. Just a P.O. box in an industrial park south of the city. That was our way in. Brightstone, it turned out, had a tiny local data center in the back of a nondescript warehouse off the turnpike. I drove past it once before deciding to go in. It looked abandoned, half the windows boarded, no signage, no lights. But I spotted 2 cameras and a card reader by the side door, which meant there was something active inside. I waited until after dark, parked a block away and walked the rest of the way on foot, hoodie up, gloves on. My heart was pounding the whole time. I wasn't trained for this. I'd watched a few videos, read a lot of forums, but nothing prepares you for how exposed you feel when you're standing outside a building, about to commit a felony just to get closer to the truth. I slipped around the back where the fence was low and rusted, climbed it carefully, boots catching once before I dropped down into the gravel lot. The door I had scoped out earlier was metal and sealed with a basic electronic lock, nothing high-end. I pulled out a cheap Raspberry Pi rig I'd prepped with a signal emulator, connected it to the reader, and ran a brute signal injection script. It took about 90 seconds. I was sweating the whole time. My fingers wouldn't stop twitching, and every sound from the street made me flinch. Then the reader flashed green. I opened the door slowly, trying not to let the hinges creak, and slipped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by weak overhead fluorescents humming above rows of server racks. The air smelled of dust and ozone. No one was visible, but I knew better than to trust silence. I had maybe 5-10 minutes tops. I moved fast, pulling the laptop from my backpack and plugging it into the first open Ethernet port I could find. I'd written a script designed to crawl for network shares, flag file types by extensions, and prioritize anything that looked like PDFs, spreadsheets, or encrypted containers. What I got was bigger than I expected. One of the directories, marked export, was filled with shipping manifests. Legitimate looking on the surface, but the codes didn't match any known product classifications. A few quick cross-references revealed them to be disguised records for military-grade weapons, AK variants, modified M4S, and portable launchers, routed through third-party logistics firms in the Balkans and rerouted into a warehouse network that, on paper, was tied to medical supplies. But it was right there in the logs: serial numbers, shipment dates, recipient contact aliases. Most of it flagged under confidential handling codes that didn't exist in any public registry. And Brightstone Holdings was the financial backbone of the entire operation. I was copying everything when I heard movement. A low mechanical sound at first, like someone sliding open a panel or shutting a cabinet too hard. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. I didn't wait to confirm. I shut the laptop, yanked the cable, and shoved everything back into my bag. I barely made it out of the row when I spotted two men moving between racks, flashlights sweeping the aisles. Not security guards in uniform. These guys were in plain clothes, but they moved like they were used to carrying guns. I ducked behind a utility cabinet, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I watched one of the beams pass just feet away. One of the men muttered something under his breath. Another voice responded, too low to make out, but angry. I crawled around the far side of the server racks, moving fast but careful, taking the long route to the rear door. I passed a security station with a desk and a monitor showing several camera feeds. That's when I realized I'd been spotted coming in. The timestamp showed my entry a full minute before I got inside. They'd seen me before I even touched the lock. No time to think about that. I hit the door, slammed it open, and sprinted. Gravel tore at my boots as I vaulted the fence again. I heard someone shout behind me, then the sharp crack of feet hitting concrete. I didn't look back. I ran until I couldn't hear them anymore. Ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like they were filled with iron. When I finally collapsed behind a row of dumpsters behind a closed gas station, I didn't even know what direction I'd come from. I sat there for half an hour before I even checked the laptop. The files were still there. Everything had copied, and I knew I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't open the video file right away. It was buried in a folder called internal_visual_review, tucked beneath layers of manifests, accounting ledgers, and encrypted documents that referenced weapons caches, anonymous bank accounts, and diplomatic shipments that weren't supposed to exist. The video wasn't labeled with anything dramatic, just a generic string of numbers and a timestamp from nearly 6 months ago. But the file size stood out. It was larger than anything else in the folder, almost 2 gigabytes, and that meant high resolution or long runtime, maybe both. I waited until I was safely back in the apartment of a friend who owed me a favor, someone who didn't ask questions when I showed up pale and sweating in the middle of the night, claiming I needed a place to crash for a while. I plugged in the drive, opened the file, and watched in absolute silence. The footage was from a security camera, probably one inside a private office or some kind of meeting room. There were 4 people in the frame. 2 of them stood to the side, wearing suits, not speaking. One sat behind a desk, and the 4th was Alan T. Milford. He looked older than in his campaign ads, less polished, more tired. He wasn't performing for anyone. No teleprompter, no smile. Just his real face, the one he probably kept hidden from the public. He leaned forward with his elbows on the desk and said, clearly and without hesitation, "The problem is this Karma Driver character has compiled a library. Not just documents, not just gossip. A structured library with receipts, files, transfers, everything. He's been doing this for years. We can't afford a leak. We shut it down." One of the men off to the side asked, "Just the archive or the source?" Milford didn't even blink. "Both. What about the device?" Milford exhaled, as if the whole situation annoyed him more than it scared him. "Leave the machine. If we burn everything, it'll raise alarms. Let it be found. Let them think it was accidental. Nobody credible will touch it without panicking." The other man nodded. Milford added, "And if someone does find it, you know what to do." The video ended there. No dramatics. No raised voices. Just an execution order, delivered in the same tone someone might use to approve a catering invoice. I didn't move for a long time after it ended. My mouth was dry and my hands were gripping the sides of the table without realizing it. I closed the file and sat there, staring at the dark screen, the weight of it sinking in deeper than anything I'd found before. This wasn't just a data dump anymore. It wasn't even just about corruption or fraud. This was a death sentence, handed out in a closed room to someone who got too close to the truth. Karma Driver had known what they were doing. The archive wasn't a panic dump or a quick upload. It was built over time, meticulously, with care. That laptop wasn't dropped or forgotten. It was left behind on purpose, positioned like a landmine or a message in a bottle. A final chance for someone else to pick it up and finish what they started. I thought about the warning I'd read that first night. You're being watched. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been a warning from someone who knew exactly how far these people would go. And now I knew too. Allison called me just after midnight. Her voice was low, clipped, the way people talk when they're trying not to let panic leak into the silence between their words. She didn't say hello, didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just said, "They're in the office. Federal agents. DHS, they said, but I don't think that's true. They're not touching computers. They're going through desks. One of them asked about me by name. I was already grabbing my things before the call even ended. She didn't go home. She didn't even go to her car. She slipped out the back of the building, ditched her phone, and flagged down a cab 4 blocks away. By the time she showed up at the building I'd been crashing in, another favor, another burner phone in my pocket. Her face was pale, eyes wide. The kind of look people have when something inside them breaks, but they haven't had time to process it yet. She had a backpack with her and nothing else. They knew, she said as soon as the door shut behind her. Not just the story. They knew about the video, the server, even the fragments I didn't publish yet. Someone up the chain leaked it. It wasn't a random raid. They came to shut it down. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking as she pulled her laptop from the bag. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard like they didn't know what to do. My editor told them I was working on a city finance story, she said. They told him national security was involved. National security, Jared. They're trying to frame this as terrorism. I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around how fast everything was moving now. Just days earlier, she'd been the one pushing me not to give up. Now she was in the same boat. Cut off, hunted, shut out of her own life. We stayed quiet for a few minutes, both of us listening for sirens that didn't come. She showed me a screenshot she managed to capture before leaving the office. It was a system access log showing an inbound connection from a government IP range. It had pinged her workstation 3 hours before the raid. That's how they found her draft and the backup files she had stored under false names. They hadn't just stumbled onto the story. They'd been watching. They're going to bury this, she said quietly. If they get to us before we finish, the whole thing disappears. Rachel, karma driver, everything. It wasn't a metaphor anymore. We weren't journalists and IT guys poking around a dirty local politician. We were targets. Assets, maybe. Liabilities, definitely. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. We knew they would be looking for us by morning. Our names would be flagged. Phones tapped. Credit cards watched. We couldn't stay in one place long. We couldn't trust anything that wasn't hardwired or turned off. And just like that, we were no longer chasing the story. We were part of it. The plan was simple on paper, but everything about it felt like we were racing against a clock that no longer had hands. We knew we didn't have much time. Allison had already wiped her accounts, and we were both using burner laptops running live OS images that left no traces when shut down. The files, every document, video, spreadsheet, transfer log, every audio snippet and photo dump, had been duplicated across several encrypted containers and split into timed releases. Each one would be sent automatically to a list of vetted journalists across the country, people Allison trusted or had worked with before, scheduled through deadman switches triggered by inactivity. The real gamble was the darknet site. Allison had secured a domain on a secured Onion server, something anonymous enough to host without instantly being flagged, but still visible to people who knew where to look. We spent 3 straight nights building the front end, organizing the content into categories, tagging everything, verifying timestamps and signatures. We didn't want to drop a mess and hope people sorted it out. We wanted it to hit with clarity. A bomb, but one with a map of the blast radius. On the final night, we were holed up in the back room of an old bookstore near Newark. The owner had no idea what we were doing. We paid him cash to use the storage space and told him we were researchers. He didn't ask questions. Maybe he used to be someone else too. I was configuring the last layer of automation, triggers that would send out the first batch of files if neither of us logged in within 24 hours. Allison was across the room writing a statement to accompany the release. Something direct, not theatrical, just the truth, laid bare. That's when I heard the door. It didn't crash open. It didn't rattle or squeal. It just clicked. By the time I looked up, there were 2 shadows moving fast through the space. Black jackets, gloved hands, no shouting, no badges. I barely had time to register what was happening. One of them hit me with something heavy. I didn't see it coming. My legs buckled. The room tilted sideways, my vision blurred, and I felt a burning coldness in my side before everything started to darken at the edges. I caught one last glimpse of Allison, her eyes locked on mine, frozen, but I couldn't move. My arms wouldn't respond. My head felt like it was full of static and gravity. Then black. No sound, no pain, just silence. And that was the last thing I remembered before they took me. I woke up on a cold concrete floor, the air thick with dust and engine oil. My wrists were tied behind my back with a coarse plastic zip, the kind you can't snap without cutting circulation. My mouth was dry, my head throbbed, and my shirt stuck to the side of my body where the bruise from the blow had started to swell. There were no windows, just a humming light overhead and the soft clicking of a security camera tracking movement. Wherever I was, it wasn't some back alley basement. This place was wired. I didn't say anything when the door opened. Just watched. The man who stepped in wasn't a thug. No mask, no show of force. He wore a pressed black jacket, slacks, clean shoes, and he moved with the confidence of someone who didn't need to shout to be obeyed. His hair was cropped close. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and deliberate. "You're awake," he said, like it was a favor. "That's good. Makes this easier." He pulled a chair from the corner, turned it around, and sat down across from me. No notes, no folder, just folded hands and a look that told me he already knew every answer. "You've been busy," he said. "Do you even understand the kind of fire you've been playing with?" I didn't answer. He continued, unbothered. "Let's skip the boring parts. You've got files. You've got access. You've got one of the last working links to something that was supposed to be dead and buried years ago. I'm not here to break fingers or play the tough guy. I'm here to offer you a way out." He leaned in just slightly. "You give us Allison. Not just where she is now, but how she thinks, where she hides backups, who she's talked to. You help us clean this up, and you walk away. No more files. No more threats. You go back to your job. Maybe somewhere new, somewhere far. Fresh start. Wipe the slate. You understand." I looked at him, searching for any hint that he wasn't bluffing. But he wasn't the kind of man who needed to bluff. He had power in the silence. And that silence settled like a weight on my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to buy time. I wanted to stall or argue or find a third option. But what I did instead was focus my eyes on the watch strapped tightly around my left wrist. It wasn't mine. Allison had given it to me 2 days earlier when we were finishing the upload scripts. A matte black band, unbranded, the kind that looked like a knockoff fitness tracker. She had said, barely above a whisper, "Press the side twice and hold. It sends a location burst. One time only. Don't wear it unless you're ready to use it." My hands were tied behind my back, but I could feel the corner of the casing press against the inside of my wrist when I flexed. My thumb reached. I held my breath. Pressed once, twice. Held. There was no vibration. No light. Nothing to confirm it worked. I just had to believe it had. The man kept talking, though I barely heard him anymore. "This isn't about punishing anyone," he said. "It's about control. You take away control from the wrong people, and there are consequences. Allison knows that, but she doesn't want to face them. She still thinks she can win. And you can choose not to go down with her." I didn't respond. I just waited and hoped the signal got through. I don't remember the exact moment they came for me. 1 second. The man in the black jacket was still talking, circling around the same offer, same threats dressed up as diplomacy. The next, the lights cut out. Hard. Not a flicker or a surge, just instant darkness, like someone had ripped the fuse box out of the wall. Then alarms. Distant at first, then closer. Footsteps. Shouting. Gunmetal voices shouting codes and positions, boots moving fast across concrete. It was chaos, but it was planned. I was on the floor, still zip-tied, trying to orient myself when the door cracked open again. This time it wasn't security. Allison appeared like she had stepped out of a different world. Face covered, hoodie soaked from rain, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and something cold and black in her hand that didn't look like it belonged to her. She didn't speak. She just crouched and cut me loose with a box cutter, yanked me up, and pulled me into the hall. No time to ask how she found me. No time to understand how she got in. Later, when we were safe, she told me everything. The signal had gone through. The burst pinged a relay point one of the anonymous groups we had contacted was monitoring. These weren't forum lurkers or bored teenagers with scripts. These were the real ones, veterans of whistleblower operations, drop point architects, encryption engineers. They didn't want credit. They didn't care about the headlines. But they hated dirty power more than anything. And when Allison reached out with the archive, with the video, with the names and dates and the full rot beneath Heart City's surface, they responded with the full weight of the underground. They jammed the security systems, punched through the closed networks, DDoS'd every agency, tracking the server metadata. While one group stalled the tracking tools, another wiped every digital trace of where we had been. And a third released the full archive. Not part of it. Not the neat summary. Everything. It hit the darknet first, then filtered through mirrored sites on the clearnet. Journalists picked it up, though not all of them stayed on the story once the pressure started. But the video of the mayor ordering a kill, the contracts showing funds rerouted into shell NGOs that funded arms deals, the private security team composed of ex-Intel operatives, that couldn't be ignored. Within 48 hours, Alan T. Milford boarded a private jet registered under a fake diplomatic mission and vanished. Last sighting was somewhere in Cyprus, then silence. No extradition. No press conference. Just gone. But he wasn't the only one who disappeared. They came for us too. Not the same goons. This time it was official, government statements about cyber intrusions, data theft, national security threats. They didn't deny the evidence. They just pivoted the focus to how it was obtained. We became the criminals. Our names hit the wires. Our faces. Descriptions. Warrants. So we vanished too. New names. New cities. No devices that aren't scrubbed to hell. We move every few months. Use only cash. We don't stay in one place long enough to get comfortable, because we know how easy it is to go from ghost to headline. But we're still working. Still collecting. Still watching. The story didn't end with the mayor. It never does. The archive was just one thread in a web most people still haven't seen. But now, more people are looking. More people are listening. That's something.